Hello! This is an update to the Stop Killing Games campaign. This is another video you don't really need to watch. Nothing critical has happened. Yet. But there has been a lot going on. The short version is everything is in limbo, but we'll be breaking out of it one way or another. Part of this is going to be an analysis of EU law. Yeah, fun times. And the rest is just going to be a big status report. Alright, let's get this over with. Okay, the big news is something that was requested of me to be sort of secret until now, but things kind of imploded. And that's through members of European Parliament, we've been able to ask the EU Commission direct questions about the legality of video games being destroyed. This is kind of a hidden option I never even knew was possible when I started this campaign. This has the potential to end this situation too, because half the battle is just getting clear answers on the law regarding this situation. You know, publishers selling you games, then destroying them after the point of sale. Well, going chronologically, Patrick Breyer of the Pirate Party in Europe found out about the campaign back in April, and not only commented positively on it, but submitted a question to the EU Commission on the legality of what was going on with the crew. He didn't consult with me or anything, he just went ahead and did it. Yeah, sure. I won't say no to that. And I didn't. I didn't even know about it until after the fact. Now, for anything related to the EU Commission, and really EU law, it's highly possible I'm going to get some details incorrect, but the way it was explained to me is that members of European Parliament can ask the EU Commission direct questions on legal matters, and it's their job to give clear answers. In some cases, this can even lead to a recognition that new law is needed, or existing law needs to be further clarified. The members of Parliament can ask them 3 questions at a time and have a word limit, but they're allowed basic follow-up questions like why or how. I didn't learn any of this until later, but in light of that, here's what Patrick Breyer asked the Commission. Now, knowing what I know for about a month now, I have to say these questions feel a little naive to me. Like, I'm sure it seemed obvious to Breyer that this is a pretty flagrant violation of the law, but as someone who's been in the trenches of game destruction as long as I have, knows government is going to evade giving a clear answer on this situation as much as possible, and you really have to narrow it down to get them to admit something. But let's look at their response. Here it is. Now, originally, I was trying to go line by line on this and explain what it means, but I've gone in circles maybe 20 times at this point, even after consulting with EU lawyers, and me trying to do this has delayed the video several days now. So rather than do that, I'm just going to go over the parts I think I understand and what the likely conclusion is. But before I do that, another member of European Parliament also stepped up during this time, Nicholas Ninas, and he actually did reach out to me. He also suggested we be involved with the questions, and I did help formulate those, as did some volunteers, including 2 lawyers operating in the EU. We spent days on this, and it felt like we were drafting the freaking Constitution, but we formed the questions, submitted them to Nicholas's office, then there were some last-minute changes to those, and here are the final questions we all came up with. See, the lack of clarity on how games as a service are governed under the law is a real nightmare for trying to have any law enforcement on publishers destroying them, since if you can't define them under the law, then laws don't apply to them. So the focus of our questions was to really narrow how exactly does the EU view what game companies are doing. The topics of these were mandated by Nicholas. He wanted 1 question just trying to establish what they are, 1 question about the unfairness of license agreements, and 1 about copyright. The way I see it, this first question is just trying to get our bearings in how the hell games as a service are defined under the law, since freaking nobody knows this. Because remember, if they're goods, then you're being deprived of your purchase after the point of sale when they shut them down. If they're services, then you're not being informed how long they're going to last. I'm sick of this Schrodinger's cat crap. Let's take the cat out of the box. The next 2 questions are what I'm calling middle finger questions. In that if the EU Commission says yes to these, they're essentially giving the middle finger to all consumers. Because we listed some terms that are in just about every online game license agreement you'll find and asked, is this fair? I mean, if they say yes, yeah, that's checkmate. That means companies can rewrite terms to any agreement after you sign it, end it whenever they want but keep your money, and require you to destroy all copies of what you already bought. Oh yeah, that sounds fair. And the final question was about copyright, since companies might try to use copyright as an excuse to destroy all copies you bought since they're the rights holders. One of the lawyers helping me with this had a great quote on this. If the commission concludes that yes, a copyright holder can remove or prohibit access to a copyrighted work even after a sale at full price, they'll essentially conclude that the authors of the books I have at home can come into my apartment and burn their works. And yes, this would be a checkmate move against us also. But not a great look for the EU if that's the route they want to go. So, with that framing in mind, here are the answers to our questions. Oh God. Okay, the short version is the first question they refuse to answer. They won't commit to them being goods or services. The cat stays in the box. They imply it doesn't matter, but it obviously does, since that determines what rights we have. They do reference directives they fall under though, but that's not that helpful. I'll explain why in a minute. The second question gets the most positive answer, saying they might be unfair. And the third question, I honestly haven't been able to decipher. They're either saying that copyright law doesn't pertain to this, therefore publishers can't use copyright as an excuse to destroy games they've already sold you, or they're saying copyright law doesn't clearly define this situation. Therefore, companies can use copyright to do whatever they want as long as it's undefined. I honestly couldn't figure this part out. Now, I'm going to lose my mind if I try to go through every sentence. I'm not a lawyer, nor do I want to be one. I really can't emphasize how much I do not want to be analyzing legal documents like this. However, I did get the opinions of the two lawyers who helped draft the original questions. They understood this, though it took them some work for them to explain it to me. So now that I think I understand something, here's how I'm breaking it down. The first principle to understand that confused me for a while is when the commission refers to the contract, that does not mean the end user license agreement by itself. Now, it can mean a lot of that, but what it really means is the business transaction, which includes the activities of the business and the average customer's expectations. And the EULA specifies the details, but Directive 9313 prohibits unfair terms causing a significant imbalance in the parties' rights and obligations to the detriment of consumers. Yeah, that sure sounds like your average video game EULA to me. Now again, they won't commit to that, but I was told this is essentially code for the commission saying, yeah, these license agreements are probably unfair. So if the EULA is unfair, then it's essentially nullified. Then all we're left with for the contract is the business's activity and the average customer's expectations. So how long does the average customer expect to be able to play a game requiring an internet connection where no time duration is specified? Well, the answer to that is chaos. I mentioned in the last video how we've seen a spread of 8 days to over 19 years and counting for how long a one-time purchase of an online-only game lasts. So how is the customer supposed to guess based on that? 2 weeks? 10 years? Forever? I've literally had people email me saying that they thought if a game came on a physical disc, you know, like The Crew, that meant the game would last forever. Now some might push back against this and say it's unreasonable for companies to support a game forever, which I agree with. But you can't look at that in a vacuum, because remember, these games were also sold under unreasonable terms. And let's not forget, some games do have proper end-of-life plans. So those games do end up working forever. Based on my experience interacting with other gamers, I can tell you what I think is the answer to this question. You want to know how long the average customer thinks their game will last? Well, I'll tell you. They don't. I think the average customer doesn't even think about this. They're living in the here and now. This thought never even enters their head. So how the hell do we measure that? Because let's not forget, the vast majority of video games do work indefinitely. That's been the standard for decades. So it's understandable that customers would just assume games they bought work, especially when no time frame is given by the publisher. You want to know what games customers are not confused about when they end? Ones with subscription fees. World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy XIV, EVE Online. Those make it pretty damn clear when your access ends. But that is not what the vast majority of games as a service do. So back to the answers, since we have no expectation for how long these games last, that makes these answers frustrating. In the event of termination of a contract for the supply of the video game over a period of time, well, we have no established period of time. So how do we calculate that? The provider must reimburse the consumer for the part of the price paid in advance for any remaining period of the contract if it had not been terminated. Well, what's the remaining period if everything is undefined? An individual reimbursement isn't a good solution for an industry-wide problem. And this is all assuming the EULAs are indeed unfair. If the EU considers them fair, then there can be no such thing as remaining time for games like this, because the time was always exactly what the publisher decided, which they don't tell you when you buy it. So these are non-answers. They're telling us to refer to these directives, but we have no criteria for how they apply to games as a service, subject to a case-by-case assessment. I was told this is essentially code for saying let the actual countries in the EU deal with this, not us. And that's really the overarching message here. The EU doesn't want to deal with this. Let the countries do it instead. Let's check back with Breyer's original answers. Yeah, it's saying something similar. More talk of the time period, which we have no basis for establishing, and heavier implying you need to go to the member states. Anyway, I probably shouldn't get too bogged down in the details, since the real answer is have countries like France and Germany deal with this. We don't want to. Which I guess is good, since we've been doing that the entire time also. Well, the name of the game has been exhausting options. So I think we're pretty close to crossing off the EU Commission. The existing laws just don't cover this situation. And we're exhausting options in more ways than one, since both Nicholas Ninas and Patrick Breyer have lost their seats in the latest election. So we don't have anyone in European Parliament anymore, to the best of my knowledge. But that was always kind of a bonus anyway. I'm not surprised this is the company I keep. You know, fired people. Now we found out it is possible for EU citizens to submit questions to the Commission also. And the lawyers volunteering on this were split if there would be a point to that. I mean, if the Commission is essentially saying let the countries handle this, then I'm not sure what else there is to do here. But maybe there is a way to narrow this down further and get them to admit something. We'll see, but I wouldn't get your hopes up on this front. So that's the big news, that the EU Commission is most likely not going to be helping. But more has been happening. How about some good news for a change? Well, in France, volunteer Snoops 4 has been spearheading a lot of efforts with the DGCCRF, France's consumer protection agency. Well, after months of effort and going through multiple officials, the issue with the cruise shutdown now has a higher official looking into it. And they said a response from them has been taking longer than usual because this matter is very complex for them. Yeah, no kidding. So they have forwarded this to their central administration, which is, quote, the highest level where most commercial disputes submitted to the DGCCRF never go. So it sounds like we're getting top tier consideration in France. And they're still trying to figure out if publishers destroying games that have already been sold to you is legal or not. Yeah, great. I mean, we still don't know what the outcome will be, but it's like I said a few months back. If we can't win on The Crew, then we're never gonna win on this. I am far more optimistic in getting clear, black and white answers from France than I am from the EU Commission. Some more news, the UK petition from last time has had some developments. After I made that video, we received a notice that the Petitions Committee found the original reply so lacking that they were going to ask government to revise their response, so as to actually address our request. Awesome. Except, whoops, Parliament has been dissolved, and there's a new election happening, so that means all petitions got shut down. They're over. Huh. Well, there's a few things to take from this. The first is, after elections, my understanding is we could relaunch the petition. So yeah, may as well do that. But here's my dilemma. Since the original flawed reply seemed to imply there was nothing in UK law to prevent publishers from destroying games they already sold you, but did seem to indicate that the lack of any stated time duration for games as a service seemed to be in violation of Consumer Protection from Unfair Trading Regulations 2008. Maybe we should just cut to the chase and ask for expiration dates directly, since that's more likely to succeed. Or we could try both. Ask the original request to the new parliament and submit a separate petition on the expiration date specifically. I'm pretty sure we could get to 10K again on both. However, I'm less sure if we could get to 100K with both. We might need to focus fire on one of them for that. Decisions. I think what we need to find out is if there's any hope of games being treated as goods in the UK or not. Because if that's a done deal and it will never happen, then we should go with expiration dates on the next petition and maximize our odds. Let me know what you think. Now those are the petitions, but I may need to revise what I said in the last video. It looks like we should probably not be going through trading standards to report the lack of any expiration date on games, and we should be contacting the Competition and Markets Authority instead. However, they're due to get much more enforcement power soon, so we should maybe wait on that. I was told August is probably the time to do something about that. I still have no clue what our time window is for customers to act from when they bought an online game to when it's shut down to when they can make a complaint. I just couldn't get a straight answer. Anyway, if you want to help out in the meantime, try to figure out every major online game shutdown in the past 3 years. Maybe 6. Then come August, we can try and start reporting those to the Competition and Markets Authority. That about does it for the UK for now. For Germany, I don't have too much news other than it's been confirmed that their consumer protection agency, the Verbraucherzentrale, is aware of the problem. Additionally, there was an online symposium held by the Pirate Party where they asked me to give a short speech on the situation and the crew. I'll link to both in the description, but it's all in German except for my portion. I didn't even understand anything that was said until after it happened, but the legal analysis was not encouraging to me. It sounded like while Ubisoft likely is in violation of the law with the way it shut down the crew, the likely remedies won't get us any closer to saving games. It's an uphill battle on everything. But that's just one opinion. It's still too early to call. We still need to hear what the Verbraucherzentrale says before we write off Germany. Canada! No news, but the petition is still up. It will be for another few months. Just a reminder. Brazil! I haven't heard much from lately. It continues to be an unknown in all this. I'm not holding my breath on things coming together there, but things can change. We'll see. Australia! The petition is closed. Now we have to wait for a response, which could be a while. Considering how there was some miscommunication on the original, we may want to consider launching another one at a later date, but I want to see what the initial response is first, since that might help us focus on a later one. Barring that though, I've been informed that ACCC is also aware of the issue with the crew, though their response has been rather tepid so far. That's okay though, because with funding, I have hired an Australian law firm to raise our complaint to the ACCC in a more targeted and official capacity. Although to be honest, they have been kind of dragging their feet. We're about a month behind where they estimated we would be. But that's not a huge problem, since the ACCC wasn't going to be doing anything big on the industry until late 2024 or 2025 anyway, according to that earlier article. So we're moving slowly, but we're not late. A lot of government moves at a glacial speed anyway. And that's about it for updates. A whole lot of waiting is what's next, which means I can finally get back to my regular videos, I think. The next big thing to happen will probably be either a response from France or else the European Citizens Initiative. Both of those events are going to be big enough to warrant their own videos when they happen. We're really in the middle of this campaign now. All the hardest parts are done, so there's less to do now on our end and more waiting on government. Until the Citizens Initiative launches, that is. That's going to need boatloads of signatures. Alright, that's it. See ya!